What is up, everybody? I know this is something a little bit different. If you guys have been following the stream, then you've seen this coming a long time. I'm finally making a podcast. So you're probably wondering what the fuck is the podcast about? We already listen to you rant every single day on stream. What possibly more could you have to say? And the answer is not much more, but a lot more concentrated. So the idea with the podcast is mostly we're gonna focus on things that I like to talk about already, like current events, boxing, other sports stuff, sometimes video games, video game news, and anything going on in the world. I like to rant a lot. I like to give my opinion on things that nobody wants my opinion on. So I figured the podcast would be a very good platform to do that on. Towards the beginning here, we're probably going to focus a lot on boxing and doing fight reviews and recaps and predictions and stuff like that. We're not going to dive too deep. We're going to try to keep it to a place where most people, whether they're casual or hardcore boxing fans, will be able to understand. So the podcast in general is gonna feel like a boxing podcast at first, and then kind of drift into more of a total podcast, like you've seen tons of times before, like with you know Theo Vaughn and Rogan and other guys like that. I don't think I'm necessarily going to be doing too many interviews or anything like that. That's probably something I'll think about in the future. But yeah, we'll see. It's gonna be fun. All right, so let's get right into it. Last night, Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders fought in front of 73,000 people in Texas. So a lot of people thought this was going to be one of the tougher tests in Canelo's careers. And, they were kind of right, to be honest. In the first couple rounds, it was back and forth. Canelo was clearly landing cleaner, harder shots, but BJJ was landing more often and kind of dictating the pace. He was circling around the ring, using that 22-foot ring that he's never fought in before, and jabbing Canelo's face off. You could tell it was kind of frustrating Canelo, but it wasn't to the point where he was getting desperate. He was just missing a lot more often than we've seen in the past. But, as the rounds progressed, you saw Canelo kind of step off the gas a little bit, but at the same time, you saw Billy Joe Saunders start to respond a lot more to any time that Canelo did land. So in the beginning, a couple rounds, Canelo was landing pretty often on Billy Joe to the body, and Billy Joe would do the classic, like shaking his head, trying to act like it didn't affect him, but those shots add up. And after a while, Billy Joe was slowing down himself, and Canelo was definitely running out of gas. And when he was posturing to the crowd and pumping his hands up, I think he was trying to get himself just as pumped up as the crowd, because he knew he had Billy Joe hurt, and he knew he was running out of steam, and he had to finish him soon if he wanted to finish this fight. And I don't think Canelo was losing the fight. I had it scored 5-2 going into that round where Canelo finished him, or where he retired on the stool. But every round up to that point was pretty much a swing round for the most part. So if people had it scored the other way, I wouldn't even be mad at it. So Billy Joe probably felt pretty bad about retiring on the stool, but I don't think he should. He had a broken orbital bone. He went out there and he fought the fight of his life. Canelo Alvarez is a generational talent. We haven't seen anybody quite like him since Floyd Mayweather, and that's just like a completely different style fighter. What Canelo has done with boxing and how he's adapted over his career is something that we haven't seen from anyone else. There's also the question of what comes next for Canelo. Immediately after the fight, the commentators and Eddie Hearn himself were talking about Caleb Plant and how Canelo wants to unify all the belts and go get Caleb Plant. And while that seems like the move that makes the most sense, I'm not sure that's exactly what the most people want to see. Like, we've got the Charlo brothers and Benavides. I really think that if Canelo wanted to prove himself by fighting the best of the best, he would take on one of the Charlos. The problem with that is they don't have the belts that he's looking for. So it doesn't really make sense for the path that him and Eddie Hearns are trying to take in terms of solidifying Canelo's greatness, because he's very much of the traditional mindset that Canelo is, where he wants to get all the belts and he wants to fight all the people that have all the hardware. And while he's never been the type of fighter to duck. If you look at his last like 6 or 7 fights, it's actually ridiculous the level of competition that Canelo has been facing. But he's always had a reason to fight the people that he's fighting. It's never just because they're the highest ranked guy. It's always because they have something that he wants, whether it be uh, status or a belt. So I really think Canelo should fight one of the Charlos next, but it also makes more sense for him to fight Caleb Plant. So yeah, we're probably gonna see that. But if Benavides is looking for somebody to fight, then I heard Triple G is available. Oh, there's one more fight we have to talk about. Usually, we're not going to be talking about too many undercard fights, especially like early prelims like this one. But there was a fight between a prospect and a veteran journeyman. Frank Sanchez, who's 17-0 with 13 KOs, versus Naji Aguilera, who's 21-10 with 14 KOs. This was a 10-round heavyweight fight, and the outcome of this was ridiculous. I don't know if you guys noticed, but this has been a theme in combat sports lately, where there's been a lot of fighters milking their injuries or milking a foul in search of getting a disqualification. And this was one of the most egregious examples I have ever seen. This guy didn't even get really hit in the back of the head. He got hit in the shoulder, and his arm and whole shoulder like stopped working. And he claimed that he got hit in the head a bunch of times. And he like walked around the ring, took 3 full steps, and then fell and started flailing around and screaming at the ref. It was a fucking shit show. I don't know what's going on with combat sports lately, but I've noticed that that's been happening more and more often. I don't know if there's something we could ever do about it, but it is interesting to see the desperation and shamelessness that people are willing to exhibit on their way to getting a victory, because the whole world could see that that wasn't a foul. And we have to talk about the headline of the week: Jake Paul getting punched in the face by Floyd Mayweather. I was very entertained by this. I'm not gonna lie. I thought for sure when I was first watching it that this was all set up and that they were just trying to pump up the fight between Logan and Floyd and yada yada yada. And I do still think that that's very true, but what I don't think is true is I don't think it was in the plan for Jake Paul to pull Floyd Mayweather's hat off and expose his brand new hair. And that was the first time a lot of us have seen Floyd with hair in a very long time. And also, that was the first time we've ever seen Floyd that upset. And I don't think that's a coincidence, because when Jake Paul pulled Floyd's hat off his head, he freaked the fuck out. We're talking like a 5-minute temper tantrum. And there's no like perfect angle. I don't know how. Everybody had a phone out. You could see it being recorded from like a million different angles, and every angle kind of covers up the hook that Mayweather hit Jake with. But I mean, afterwards you could clearly see his eye was fucked up, and that definitely did land because you could hear it in the video. So it's interesting that out of this super long career that Floyd has had fighting some of the most annoying fighters of all time, that Jake Paul is the one that really get him to act out of character and just fucking lose it. So I do think that this is a lot of posturing to set up a Jake Paul fight after the Logan Paul fight. But get this. This is what I want to see. I want to see Floyd fight Logan in July or June, whenever they're fighting, and obviously beat Logan, and then rematch Logan, and in the same night fight Jake Paul afterwards. Come on. This would make the most amount of money and be by far the most entertaining. Because we all know what happened. He would knock out Logan the first time, and then he would knock him out the second time, and then he would knock out Jake Paul, and it would be fucking hilarious. And then Mayweather would have on his legacy that he knocked out 2 oversized YouTubers, and I don't know if that would really help it, but it would be funny. So I burned through all my fucking topics, and it's been like 10 minutes. This is an issue with the not having the stream in front of me. As a lot of you guys know, I'm primarily a Twitch streamer, and I have the Twitch chat to interact with and the video game that I'm typically playing to interact with, so it helps slow down the conversation. So, it's going to be a learning process. I still, as of right now, haven't even named this podcast or got a logo for it or any overlays. I just got this camera, lights, got the setup, and I said, fuck it. Let's record and talk about the fights from last night. We'll put it out on YouTube. I'll make another YouTube channel for just the podcast, as well as putting it on my current YouTube channel. And I'll put all the links to all that kind of stuff in the description. Whichever direction it seems to be taking off is where I'll take it. If you guys seem to be liking the new channel, where I'm going to be posting all the podcast content, like clips, full episodes, giveaways, shorts, all that kind of stuff. Or if you guys seem to like it more on the current YouTube channel that we've already grown quite a sizable community at around 2,000 subs, I'd like to be able to continue going on this channel, the one that we've built already, but with the YouTube algorithms and stuff like that, it might just not work out. So please, if you could check out the podcast link in the description, it's going to bring you to the official channel for this podcast that you're listening to right now that I haven't named yet or really done much preparation for outside of buy a bunch of stuff. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's podcast. We're going to start short and then elongate over time as we get more segments and things to talk about. Right now, I just wanted to talk about a little boxing and kind of introduce this whole thing. And as the podcast grows, not only in ideas, but in viewership and in life, so will the length of the podcast and the segments that we have on it. I got a lot of ideas. Don't forget to check out the Twitch channel if you guys want to give me any ideas. I'm always open to ideas. I want to do video submissions. So if you have questions you want to ask me, click the Discord link in the description. And I'm going to put a channel in my Discord where you guys can send me videos for me to watch on the podcast and then answer or give my opinion. Or, I'm not one to be given the best advice in the world, but I can give advice. You know what I mean? We could try it, but one last thing. You're probably wondering what these flowers are about. I was looking for some cool plants to put in my podcast area to kind of bring in the homey vibe, but I didn't have any cool plants, so I got these flowers right here. And today is Mother's Day, so shout out to all the mothers out there that are maybe possibly watching a niche podcast from a Twitch streamer about boxing and current events in the world. I don't know how many of you are out there watching right now, but if you are, I love you. Keep being amazing. As always, I appreciate everybody who comes by the content. I love you guys. See you on the stream. See you next time. Hallelujah. Holla back on yourself.